Hey folks, well, maybe I'm losing track of time. Was it just 2 weeks ago we had that great movie doubleheader, Barbie and Oppenheimer, opening in theaters across America? Talk about contrast. So last week I did a post on Margot Robbie. Seemingly a lighthearted movie, but I haven't seen it yet, but allegedly with, quite a bit of messaging. And Margot Robbie's really got quite an amazing chart, so I was impressed enough to discuss it in some length. Just to switch from the seemingly light to the distinctly heavy, I want to look today at the horoscope of Robert Oppenheimer, who was, arguably the driving force behind the Manhattan Project and the American development of the atomic bomb that helped end World War II. So he's quite a formidable intellect, needless to say, and I confess I have not seen the movie, nor have I read the highly esteemed biography, which is called American Prometheus, referring to the god who basically captured fire. But I have read up everything on Wikipedia about him and know enough now that I can allude to features of his chart that are, distinctive enough to merit discussion. So, without further ado, let's dive right into that, quite an amazing horoscope. Okay, so this is the horoscope of Robert Oppenheimer. He was born 22nd of April, 1904. Astrodienst gives his birth time as 8:15 in the morning. There's some doubt about that. I think it's rated DD, dirty data, some uncertainty. And there are various other birth times offered. I was content to go with this, giving him a Gemini ascendant. I subsequently tweaked it a little bit. Contrary to my usual practice of tweaking earlier, I tweaked it a little bit later. And so actually the birth time I'm using here is 8:25 in the morning. Be that as it may, we're quibbling perhaps. Gemini Ascendant, I think, satisfies pretty much everything we know about him. And so I'm going to go forward on that basis. So scan the Kendras and, immediately we see two powerful yogas here. The Panchamaha-purusha yogas, Jupiter, that's called Hamsa Yoga, Jupiter in its own sign in a Kendra, and Venus in its sign of exaltation, Pisces, which forms what is called Malavya Yoga. These are two Panchamaha-purusha yogas, one of the most esteemed in Jyotish. And together, their commonality is that both Jupiter and Venus are Brahminical grahas. So, meaning that, in the day, Oppenheimer would essentially be of a Brahmin family, which means, custodians of art, culture, education, learning, philosophy, and so on. So, and it thereafter sort of, qualifies the person to be a capable consultant or advisor to the rulers or administrators of the day. So this is pretty extraordinary. The two of them together in the 10th house. Now, as I say, they form major yogas in and of themselves, Malavya and Hamsa, respectively. But by their combinations, they also form other substantive yogas as well too. You see, Jupiter is a Kendra lord, which owns the 7th and the 10th houses. Meanwhile, Venus is a trinal lord owning the 5th. So Venus combines once with Jupiter, a combination of lords of 5 and 7, and then does it again, combining as lords of 5 and 10. So those are two separate dharma-karma adhipati yogas. And one of them, that of the 5 and 10 combination, is actually what we call a true Raja Yoga. And needless to say, they are powerful because both planets are in very good condition. Jupiter Swarashi, its own sign, Venus Ucha in its sign of exaltation. So this is pretty substantive. Furthermore, there's a nodal Raja Yoga that is formed here as well. And the rule goes, if a trinal lord be found in a Kendra with one of the lunar nodes, the node will act as a proxy for the planet that owns that sign, and then the trinal lord will combine with it and effectively create a dharma-karma adipati yoga. So this is it. Venus is the trinal lord. It combines with Ketu, lunar node, in the 10th house, and therefore Ketu functions as a proxy for Jupiter, and so the Venus-Ketu combination is effectively another dharma-karma adipati yoga. We can actually get another one over here with Rahu, where Venus, the trinal lord, is in full aspect with Rahu, and Rahu acts as a proxy for Mercury, its dispositor, and so then you get lords of 4 and 5 combined. We could actually do even yet another one where Jupiter functions as a trinal lord as well too, and its full aspect upon Rahu, which acts for Mercury, and you get another nodal Raja Yoga. So this chart is brimming over with powerful yogas, courtesy of Jupiter and Venus and the nodal axis running through the 4th and the 10th house. But wait, there's more. Dana yogas, we can look for combinations there. We need a money lord, that's the moon lord of the 2nd, or Mars lord of the 11th, to combine with one of the trinal lords. Well, in this case, what do we have? The moon is the lord of the 2nd house, the money house, and it is in mutual aspect with Saturn, who is lord of the 9th. So there you get a money lord combined with a trinal lord. Therein lies a Dana yoga. We have another one here in the 11th house, where Mercury is the trinal lord, and it combines with Mars, which is the money lord. So there's another Dana yoga located in the 11th house. Oppenheimer has a Buddha Ditya yoga. The rule is Sun and Mercury combine in the same sign, and one or the other influences the 1st or the 5th house by occupation, ownership, or aspect. So in this case, Sun and Mercury are together, and in the 11th house, they together aspect the 5th. Boom, job done. Buddha Ditya yoga. Again, a strong yoga because the sun is exalted in Aries. Everything I've discussed so far is strong. I mean, there are yogas and there are yogas. You can get dharma-karma adipati yogas formed and dana yogas formed where the planets themselves, they own the requisite houses in order to meet the rule of the yoga, but their strength may be, modest or even nil. In all cases that I've discussed so far, everything is strong. Moon is Swarashi, Saturn is Swarashi. Their combination creating a Dana yoga of lords of 2 and 9 is very robust. The other Dana yoga with Mercury and Mars, it's strong because Mars is in its own sign. The Buddha Ditya is strong because Sun is exalted. I mean, it just doesn't end. Oppenheimer also has a Saraswati yoga. The rule for Saraswati is that the 3 natural benefics, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, are all dignified by sign and in positive houses, meaning trines, kendras, or the 2nd house. And if most of that is fulfilled, we can call that a Saraswati yoga. Now, it happens that sometimes, one or the other of these planets will fall out of, favor as dictated by the rule. But primarily it's Jupiter that carries the day. And then, Venus and Mercury have got, one or the other has got to be strong and sort of, to help carry the load. In this case, Jupiter is full blown, strong, yeah. And Venus is too. Mercury is not doing anything useful, in terms of strength. It is in a positive house, and to its credit, it is not combust. and it does form Buddhaditya Yoga. So it's not dragging its heels. So the Saraswati Yoga here is carried, if not to the letter of the definition, certainly to the spirit, and in most cases, any Jyotishi will call this a Saraswati Yoga. So what is Saraswati Yoga? It's a love of learning. It's, indicative of an erudite person who embodies smarts, intellectual capability, rational mind, deep thinker, philosophical type, all of that. So it's all in play for Oppenheimer. Kuja Dosha, I always look to see whether anything's going on there. And the rule is, if Mars is in the first, the second, the fourth, the seventh, eighth, or 12th from the ascendant, or from the moon, or from Venus, Kuja Dosha can be created. In Oppenheimer's case, it's relatively trivial. He has Mars in the second house from Venus, so small potatoes, as we would say, inconsequential. He did have relationship issues, but Kuja Dosha is not to blame. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about his history. I mean, basically, he was a bit of a boy genius. He went through grades 3 and 4 in 1 year. He skipped half of grade 8. He graduated high school at age 17. He went to Harvard. He graduated at age 21. He then went to Cambridge, to study physics, and then went to University of Göttingen in Germany, which was then the leading university for studies in theoretical physics, quantum physics, and so on and so forth. And there he met some of the leading figures of the day: Werner Heisenberg, Wolfgang Pauli, Enrico Fermi, and Paul Dirac, all of whom later became famous physicists. So he was held in very high esteem. He was quite a very competent linguist. He studied French in university. Once while being at University of Göttingen in a sort of a little bit of an exchange lecture circuit, he gave a lecture in Dutch with very, very scant acquaintance with the language. So you see Moon, Swarashi in the second house, can indicate some linguistic capabilities. This Moon is under stress, however. Both Mars and Saturn aspect it, and both Mars and Saturn are strong. Mind you, Jupiter aspects the Moon as well too, and it relieves it somewhat. But he was known for being forthright and speaking up whenever he had something to say, and also would not shut up as well too. At one point in university, students passed a petition begging the professor to muzzle him, because once he started talking, he wouldn't stop. So he was very vocal, erudite, opinionated, etc., etc. And as far as second house issues go as well too, what goes in and out of the mouth, he was a chronic chain smoker. Eventually died of throat cancer. But this was one of his several flaws, but forgivable in light of his substantive intellect. So where's the physics in this? So Jupiter and Venus in the Kendras, inclines one to think more of a philosophical type, and he was that. One of his, fellow physicists, I think it was Wolfgang Pauli, said to me, seems to me that for Oppenheimer, physics was more of a avocation or a hobby, and his real passionate interest was in psychoanalysis and in philosophy. He was a great reader of Greek and Hindu classics, and was very much enamored of the Bhagavad Gita, pretty much knew it inside out, had taught himself Sanskrit so that he could read many of these classic texts in the original. and became famous slash infamous for having quoted a line from the Bhagavad Gita, effectively saying we have become death and capable of destroying the world. And that quotation has lately been taken to task by the modern Hindu community. Be that as it may, he had a passionate interest in philosophy and in mysticism, and we can see some of that with Saturn in the 8th house, which is a marker for some probing interest and serious attention to what we would call, traditional oral traditions and hidden knowledge and occult subjects and esoteric matters, among which we could include theoretical physics and quantum mechanics and all the rest of that, which in its day was so complex that, people in the field who gave lectures on this, there were really very few people who could understand them because, they understand their words, but the concepts were very hard to grasp because it was, like nothing ever broached before. So, I think this has been said about Einstein's papers that were literally only a handful of people who could understand the consequences of what he had developed. And such was true in some respects of the work of Oppenheimer and other theoretical physicists of the day. So my question to myself is, where's the physics in this? So if you do a career pointer analysis here, which involves, taking a Sudarshan perspective on the horoscope and looking for that planet or planets which most influence the ascendant and its lord, or from the Chandra Lagna, that ascendant and its lord, or from the Surya Lagna and that ascendant and its lord. I shouldn't say or, it's and. Udaya Lagna and Chandra Lagna and Surya Lagna, examining the influences upon those three Lagnas and their three respective Lagneshas, Lagna lords, we find a planet that is dominant in influencing all three. That planet for Oppenheimer is Mars. And we then look at what planet does Mars associate with or aspect that resides in strength. So there are a couple here. Mars does aspect the moon, which is strong. But more obviously, Mars associates with the sun, which is exalted, and the two are in the same sign as well. Now, the sun rules the 3rd house. And the 3rd house, among other things, rules physics. Mars itself is more inclined for, engineering. And there was this component. Oppenheimer was selected to lead the Manhattan Project because he understood the theoretical physics behind the challenge, but he was also well acquainted with the engineering challenges that would be required to build a bomb based upon the theoretical physics that he and his team on the Manhattan Project were obliged to make practical. Build it without blowing themselves up, need we add. Anyway, so there's the connection with physics in his horoscope. What are the other notable things about Oppenheimer? He was a bit of a womanizer. When he was after he finished his studies at Göttingen University, he then went back to America and he split his time. He had a fellowship, and 2 universities wanted him so badly, that is Harvard and Caltech, that they agreed to let him split his fellowship between the 2 universities. And so he served his fellowship duties during that year or years, splitting his time between those 2 universities. Then he accepted a post at University of California at Berkeley, where he, ensconced himself in the faculty and began to make a name for himself for his charisma and his brilliance. But he also cut a bit of a swath through the social milieu of the day too, and alienated some of his own colleagues and associates by less than discreet affairs with their wives or girlfriends. Later on, he married a woman who had been thrice divorced, I think, And theirs was a tempestuous relationship as well. And after moving to Los Alamos, New Mexico, to work on the Manhattan Project, he had a few other affairs with the wives of other colleagues. And so a very restless individual vis-a-vis his personal life. Can we see it in the horoscope? Yeah, you bet we can. Mutable dual signs rising will give you dual signs, Dvishvabhava signs on all the kendras. So you have the Ascendant Lord Mercury with Sun and Mars, two, Kshatriya planets. Oh, need we add, this is a mark of leadership and his ability to, be the director for the Manhattan Project. Well, at least the technical director. He reported to a general who had hired him, but he basically led it through, technical expertise. And he had very strong opinions and was dictatorial when he had to be, but he was also extremely hands-on to and involved in the minutiae of everything in that project. But back to relationships. So, he was driven, Ascendant Lord with Sun and Mars. There's a very powerful drive there, a sort of an attitude like, I cannot be stopped and nobody can rein me in. I am a free spirit, and this was back in the 40s when things were not quite as free and easy and open as they are today. Then look at the seventh house. There you have Sagittarius, another sign of duality, of course. Furthermore, its Lord, Jupiter, is in a dual sign as well, too. And not only a dual sign, but a water sign. So dual signs and water signs are both, somewhat inclined to promiscuity. If they, influence the seventh house or the seventh Lord. And so Jupiter owns the seventh here, and then Jupiter is powerful in a Dvishvabhava Rashi, Pisces, which is, Jupiter is the planet of abundance, and Pisces is, a sign of multiplicity. So there you have it. And, the Rahu-Ketu axis simply, helps to magnify or aggravate all of that. And so lots of tempestuous relationships in his life. I think that's about as much as I'm going to dwell upon here. Let's close that out. Okay, so let me scoop up the last little bits of the Oppenheimer file. So I neglected to discuss his Dasha sequence. So he ran Mercury Dasha from roughly age 22 up until age 39. This was largely an academic era, but one in which he really made his name. It spans the time from when he graduated from Harvard, went to Cambridge for a number of years, then the University of Göttingen, where he immersed himself in theoretical physics and met many of the leading, theoretical physicists of the day. Then back to America, split his time between Harvard and Caltech, and then, ended up at UCL Berkeley. Then, during that time, he published many significant papers, alone or with associates, not only on the subjects of theoretical physics, but also on astrophysics as well, too. So he really made his name during that era. Now, they say that the most important dashas in one's life are the dashas of planets which own, or especially own the first or the 10th, but also occupy the first or the 10th. Well, why? Because the first is associated with name and fame, and the 10th with, karma, in the sense of what we do in the world draws attention to us. So his Mercury period brought him right up to 1943, by which time he had been identified by those in the know as a person who could potentially contribute hugely to the Manhattan Project, and as it turned out, was even capable of leading it. He was not only a brilliant man from a theoretical level, but he was a very good administrator as well too. So at that point in 1943, Mercury Dasha segues into Ketu Dasha. Now Ketu, of course, because it's in the 10th house, and because of its proxy function, it draws in huge power. I mean, it basically summons up the Hamsa Yoga formed by Jupiter there in Pisces 10th. It summons up the Malavya Yoga that's formed there as well. It brings forth the two dharma-karma adipati yogas formed between Venus and Jupiter. And it forms separately nodal Raja yogas as well too. So Ketu is huge in terms of bringing out almost everything notable and pronounced and work for which he became famous. But then, of course, Ketu doesn't last long, 7 years. And then by 1950, into the 50s, then things, went a bit sideways. The whole McCarthy era, the hunt for communists under every bed in America. Back in the day in Berkeley, Oppenheimer was a very liberal thinker. And he, hung out with people who were members of the Communist Party, and he had very liberal views, what, we would call today socialist leanings, if not communist leanings. But he didn't hide it. He was forthright about it when he was, interviewed for the Manhattan Project. But he was so valuable, I guess, that they, some people petitioned, the powers that be to say, don't exclude this guy just because he had, socialistic leanings. He is vital to the Manhattan Project. But after that was all over, the mood in America shifted, and McCarthyism began to hunt down every closet communist in the country. And, then he kind of fell out of favor, and things went, sideways, for him to some degree. Now, he always was held in high esteem, but, he was tarnished by this whole anti-communist era. We can see that to some degree with, Venus Dasha, will give results for itself. It's Lord of the 5th, but it's also Lord of the 12th. So there is some diminishment there or loss of reputation. And Venus will also give results for its nakshatra dispositor, which is Mercury. And Mercury, it is his ascendant lord, and it's well placed, although it is Sandhi and on the edge of moving into another sign, and it is, afflicted by both Sun and Mars. So he was subject to, criticisms on the social level, on the political level. And, that somewhat tarnished his reputation, but it does not change, his role in history, and it does not diminish the massive intellect and other capabilities that he brought to bear on the Manhattan Project. So, very interesting horoscope. Hope you enjoyed it. See you again.